Okay, so before we address the title, let's start here. Uh, Capitalism in general, as a whole, as a concept, as a structure, relies on consumers, right? So capitalism is the idea of free markets and people competing, right? And that value is determined by the consumer. So, thus, the market relies on the consumer and how much value they associate to whatever product or service. So, capitalism as a system thrives on increased consumption and number of consumers, increased number of consumers, and increased rate of consumption. So, uh, essentially, as a system, as an economy, they want citizens, people to consume more, spend more money, get more stuff. And what that looks like in today's day and age is a lot of like cheap vice. You know what I mean? Like eating, drinking, gambling, stuff like that, right? That's where most of the money is. Like numbing and escapism as a whole is like the largest um, amount of spending for the average consumer. So, to balance, right? Balance is invented, right? I understand that balance, like as a physical thing. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like balance as a lifestyle. Because balance as a physical thing, in terms of like scales or a ratio, is obviously real, and a mathematical term, and you know what I mean, can be measured and observed. But when it comes to like lifestyle change, where people are like, oh, just go out on the weekends, be balanced, moderate, whatever, all that garbage. It's fake. It's literally just a like wishful thinking, a fantasy concept used to justify hedonism, right? Used to justify indulgence in consumerism. So, and this is my justification. This is why I believe so. Forget the fact that I have resentments with the word and have tried to balance all different aspects of my life and failed miserably countless times, right? And that the word itself bothers me because I can't attain it. That aside, it looks different everywhere across the world. What is considered a balanced lifestyle here in the U.S. would be considered absolute degeneracy in most of the Eastern world, right? Again, Saudi Arabia, right? Even most of Eastern Europe, it would be considered completely out of whack. And yes, I know like parts of Eastern Europe still have like strong drinking culture, so on and so forth. But like in general, they have much stronger values and moral compasses than here. So that's my main justification, is that in other places around the world where consumerism is not so heavily dependent on, right, and where morality is still absolute and still something that is very much so taught and observed and believed as like unwavering, it's not a thing. There's no such thing as balance. There's right and wrong, right? There's, you know what I mean, strive for better, right? And continue to grow. Like, it's not this concept of like, oh, only like, gamble, drink, and smoke and go to the strip club on the weekend and then go do a 9 to 5 and all's well, right? It's not, you know what I mean, being absolute, degen throughout the week and then go to the confession booth on Sunday and call it a day. Like, that's not how any of this works, and everybody knows that. But they don't want to address it because that would mean they would have to let go of their precious, booze, gambling, or whatever other cheap vice, escapism vice that people like to use. Whether it be hard drugs or whatever. So that's why I believe it's fake. I believe that there is no such thing as any type of cheap vice that could be used in moderation. And I think everybody who uses such an addictive substance or like addictive behavior is on the path to become an addict. But there are social consequences to not letting them get there. So let me explain that a bit. So basically, they say they have that saying, like, whoever drinks, not everybody who drinks is going to be an alcoholic. But if you drink, and that's the concept. People think like you become an alcoholic first, right? That you become an alcoholic first. I mean, like obviously the behaviors and the personality you have before you're predisposed. But my whole point is that that substance, right, the way it interacts with your brain, over time will continuously develop these traits, right? So if you, instead of, like if you drink, right, let's say you drink, you start drinking, right, instead of being able to stop, there's no consequence, there's no reason to stop, you know what I mean? You don't have to go to work, you don't have, it's socially accepted, all of these things. And there's even proof in this in history. We'll get to that in a second. Everybody would be completely alcoholic. And I mean to the point of chemical dependence, right? If it was socially accepted and there was no, ill effects or consequences, people would straight up be fully chemically dependent on the substance. And justification for this is back in the 30s, right? And even early, like 20s to 30s, before water was completely accessible, people were drinking beer and alcohol nonstop. This is the thing, though. People be like, oh, well, that's just because of the water, this, that, and the third, and the water is not healthy. Right. Tea had already been discovered for the most part. Just because it was not popular, there's a reason why it wasn't popular. Boiling water and adding tea was, and coffee was like the revolution in terms of like clean water and having people no longer be completely alcoholic. But that had been around. Like there had been some exposure. The only reason that it became so mainstream was because of marketing propaganda put in place by, corporate America to increase productivity during the Industrial Revolution. And I mean, I'm going a little way off topic here, but my point is that when there was no consequence in terms of, social, economic, or consequence in terms of drinking or over drinking or overindulging in cheap vice, the entire society was essentially chemically dependent on the substance. And right after that revolution started in terms of corporate America and that propaganda for coffee being put in the workplace and like free coffee and stuff like that, shortly after, I think like literally 3 or 4 years afterwards, AA became a thing. Like immediately after, right? People who where the people who couldn't manage their use because the socio and economic consequences were not incentive enough, right? It was not a large enough reason. It did not justify or warrant their change in lifestyle. And essentially, whenever these people wanted to change, they weren't really willing to do what it took to change. They just wanted to, like, essentially, if they could drink without consequence again and go back to the way it was and everybody just, was just like them, they wouldn't change. Yeah, so that's why balance is fake. It's completely imaginary. It's wishful thinking, instilled by capitalist consumer propaganda, which is, I know, a wild take, but also completely extreme. I'm not saying I believe in this 100%, but it's a great idea to think about when people are like, oh, just moderate, just be in balance. No such thing. Anyway,